Hi everybody, welcome to Topic 7. It's the last of Unit 1. The first one in which I waved to you with my left hand, so that's a very exciting change. I like to keep you guessing and see how things might pan out in all these lectures. Anyway, today we're talking about the league structures of the various sports around the world and associated with that, the rhythm of international sport. So we're looking for is ways in which to connect local events with global events and national teams with events that happen not just at, say, on a quadrennial basis like the Olympics or the World Cup, but pretty much all the time. And you'll find that the rhythm of international sports sort of leads to a whole plethora of chances for countries to interact together in the international system. Basically, it means that our attempt to look at sports and international affairs is made a lot more simple because there's so much going on all of the time. Let's start here with a look at one sport in particular and how it plays out in its rhythm. So this is the groups that played in Spain 2014, which is the FIBA, which is the International Basketball Association, the Basketball World Cup. This is an event that until 2010 or so was called the Basketball World Championships. They decided that World Cup had a certain cachet in international sports, and that if they had a World Cup of their own, that it would perhaps get more recognition. So the Basketball World Cup had until 2014. 24 teams. It's going to expand to 32, which is a pattern that the Soccer World Cup followed after 1994. It was 24. Then it went to 32 after that, in an attempt to get more representation from different places in the world. So you see down below this table a list of the berths assigned to different regions of the world. So yes, Spain 2014, the event happened, but it took 3 years, basically, 2011, 2012, and 2013, for the different federations, the Europeans, the Africans, the Asians, etc., the Americas and Oceania, to determine who their representatives would be. That means that for 3 years before 2014, you had qualification matches. Essentially, the concept is that the World Cup begins when the first qualification begins, and the championship begins when the first game of the tournament. So to take this to a soccer example, in Brazil 2014, you read a bit about this in the Grant Wall article we had tied to 1-1. We're talking about aspirate nations and nations sort of coming out of the forward. We looked at Palestine. Those officially were Brazil World Cup 2014 matches that happened years in advance. And when you got to Brazil 2014, then you had the championships, the final 32, or in this case, the final 24. And that means you've got all these different countries coming together in a whole host of ways all throughout the years between the two tournaments. Essentially, then you don't have much of a break at all, particularly if you add sub-events like the European Championships or the Pan Am Games or something like that, where the countries in a given region will have tournaments that happen usually on the off 4 years. So Eurobasket happened in 2013. It'll happen in 2009, and they sort of go that way. Olympics in 2012, Eurobasket 2013. FIBA World Championship 2014. So the rhythm keeps us going. The same thing sort of happens with club teams as well. So this is a picture of the Stavanger Oilers of the Norwegian Major Hockey League. They qualified to play in something called the IIHF, is the Hockey Federation. It has something called the Continental Cup, where European club teams come together, at least the ones from the northern part of Europe where hockey is most common. And it means that even on the club level, you are connected. And we'll look at some specific examples of how this plays out here later in this conversation. But just know that not just national teams, but club teams are involved in this continual round of competition. The most famous of these is the Champions League in European soccer, where you have the champions plus some other qualifiers from all the countries in Europe come together in knockout rounds that basically start in June, of July of one year and wrap up in June of the next year. And so there's this constant connection of nations and national teams to the rhythm of international sport. Now, it happens in individual sports as well. And these aren't the only ones here, but they're the ones that are the most common. They also tend not to have much of a team element. I mean, there's exceptions. For example, in tennis, which you see here below a picture from the French Open, which happens every year. It's one of the Grand Slam tournaments. There is something called the Davis Cup, where national teams form and they go and compete. But it's certainly in the 30 or 40 years since I was young, You haven't heard much about the Davis Cup more popularly, more broadly. You have to be pretty much a tennis aficionado to understand what it is, whereas lots of other people will get what the French Open is and the Grand Slam is. Same thing. This trophy up here on the top is from the British Open or the Open tournament, which is an annual golf tournament that happens. Yes, golf has a sort of a team thing through what's called the Ryder Cup, which happens between the United States and Europe. But that's a pretty informal thing. It doesn't happen very often, meaning it happens, once in a year or every 2 years, but it doesn't have a regularity to it the way other sports do. Boxing, too. One of the advantages of boxing, or if you want to look at other sports, MMA or judo or some of the other martial arts like taekwondo, there are regular competitions. They're competed by individuals who are representing themselves, but they're tied to a country. So Manny Pacquiao, who's a very, very famous boxer who was a world champion in his weight class, he's from the Philippines. So you would say it's Manny Pacquiao of the Philippines against Floyd Mayweather of the United States. So these are individual sports that have a rhythm of their own where individuals competing for and of themselves are also still tied to countries. And there's a national pride element and things that all tie together. Squash, we'll look at squash for a minute. Squash is a sport that is an up-and-comer. It's one that will be probably in the Olympics in 2020. And it's something that has its own sort of series of events. Now, I put both a list of events here in 2014, the global squash events from 2014, but what I also wanted to emphasize is the places where the championships took place. So we're going to look later in this class about what it means to host an event and what countries are trying to do when they host, what their point is of trying to show what they have to the rest of the world. This is a pretty broad list, right? You've got a trio of Asian countries, an African country, a North American country, two African countries because Egypt is also in there, and then one from the Americas. So you've got a breadth of where the games are hosted, and it means that those different regions, when they're trying to show what they can do in different contexts, the hosting becomes important as well. So the countries themselves, the athletes themselves, the club teams themselves, and the hosts themselves all sort of come to matter. All right, so this is a chance for me to come back in and say hello again. I'm sorry, I forgot this was a left-handed one. We're going to look at some specific examples, and in particular what it means foreign from the United States and foreign from Mexico, and how these sort of play together. The structure's a little complicated because you have clubs, and you have national teams, and you have IFs. We looked at those before, right? International Federation, Soccer Federation, for example, Hockey Federation, for example, Basketball Federation, for example. And then you have the Olympic Games and how they all sort of connect together. So you've got this constant rhythm, constant events, constant qualification, and then the connection where the different groups are trying to accomplish different things. We'll see what that means here as we go through. Let's duck back to here and go here. All right, the U.S. soccer structure. Now, certainly I don't want you to memorize this. It's quite complex. This is just the United States. This is just what exists in the U.S. soccer structure. And this actually isn't even complete because you have amputee teams and other disabled teams that compete as subsets of the other national teams. But there's a lot to it. So you've got all within the umbrella of the USSF, the U.S. Soccer Federation. You've got the adult national teams and the youth national teams. You've got adult leagues, which are some are professional, right? So you've got MLS, which is the most famous one, NASL, USL. The Adult Soccer Association is just any of us like me who continues to play in some sort of registered formal fashion. I'm under the USSF structure. U.S. Club Soccer as well. Those would be more formal clubs, development academies and the like. You have the Women's Professional League. You have the NC2A, and you've got all kinds of youth leagues. All of these are represented by the USSF. Most of them have some sort of competition or engagement that takes place beyond the USSF structure, meaning you qualify to go do something on up. And when that happens, you have to have this affiliate tie to other organizations. So this is where some of the stuff we talked about, this whole unit, come together. So you've got a country's federation, right? The Soccer Federation. It's a domestic NGO. It's affiliated with another domestic NGO in the U.S. Olympic Committee. It's affiliated with a regional NGO in CONCACAF. So the USSF job is to promote soccer, right? The U.S. Olympics Committee is designed to promote U.S. sports to the Olympics. So if there's going to be a soccer team from the United States in the Olympics, the USSF has to work with the U.S. Olympic Committee because it's the Olympic Committee's job to work with the International Olympic Committee. If they're just going to do something regionally or another level, then the USSF, the domestic NGO, works with the regional NGO, CONCACAF. So the USOC, the U.S. Olympic Committee, is affiliated with the IOC, represents the U.S. interest there, and CONCACAF is affiliated with FIFA. So you have the domestic NGO tied to a regional NGO tied to a big sporting bingo, right? And it represents U.S. soccer interests in global club and in national competition. And what this sort of means for the U.S. women's national team and the Olympics, as opposed to the U.S. women's national team and the World Cup, is sort of a dual structure. So in this case, on this chart, you see the U.S. women's national team and their logo. They fall under the auspices of the USSF. If they want to go to the Olympics, then the next step for the team, the USSF, is to partner with the USOC. USSF cannot go directly to the IOC. They have to go to the USOC, goes to the IOC. Now, all of these have their own rules and regulations to follow. I mean, I know we had that lecture talking about what citizenship means, say, for the United States, but for what it means for the IOC can be different, and you have to comply at all these levels. Now, because it's a soccer event, qualifying to get into the Olympics is actually governed by CONCACAF. So then the USOC and the USSF have to work with CONCACAF, which works with FIFA, which goes to the IOC. So it's actually quite complicated, but there's lots of levels for that political interaction to take place. You don't have to memorize this or anything like that. Just be aware that something seemingly simple as a U.S. team going to the Olympics has these various layers and all things playing into it. If we did something with billiards or with archery or whatever, it would look similar to this with this sort of complex structure. Now, it happens for clubs as well. And what I want to look at here is what a Liga MX, or the Mexican First Division League, looks like in terms of its relationship with FIFA. So you have a club team in the Mexican league. So the Mexican league is called the Liga MX. So the Liga MX has a team called Cruz Azul. Cruz Azul in the 2012 to 2013 season qualified for through the Liga MS and through the FMF, the Soccer Federation in Mexico, for a competition called the CONCACAF Champions League. That took place the next year. So 2012-2013 led to competition from 2013 to 2014. The Cruz Azul, competing against club teams from the United States, Canada, Central America, and the Caribbean, won. They're the champions. So 2012, 2013, 2013, 2014, at the end of 2014, they were able to go to a FIFA event called the Club World Cup. It's an 18 tournament. And this picture down here in the bottom right is of them playing against Barcelona in the Champions League. So Barcelona are the champions of Europe, play Cruz Azul, the champions of CONCACAF, and that connection is all through there. Now, when you go to that competition, because they aren't national teams or club teams, you have individuals from a whole host of countries participating in the Club World Cup, right? So it might make sense if you're looking at baseball in the United States, right? We know that Seattle Mariners, one of their all-time most famous players is Ichiro Suzuki. He played in the United States, but he remained a Japanese citizen. So if he wanted to compete in World Baseball Championships for the national team level, he played for Japan. If the Mariners had an example like this, they don't. But if they had one like this, they were looking for Cruz Azul, then the Japanese player Ichiro would have played for the American team, Seattle Mariners, in that competition. Now, all of us in the Northwest know it's been a long time. Seattle's been really good, so that's maybe a sad example. But it's sort of the way it works. So you've got individuals in these clubs, in these competitions, and it all comes together in a very interesting way. So how does it tie back together then? What we're looking at here is a structure by which countries and teams are constantly involved in international competition, where then we have all kinds of opportunities to look at how the sporting realm and the political realm intersect on the international level. Because you have different national identities, because you have different club identities, because these things come together in different ways, in different sports that matter in different ways, we'll have lots to look at. In Unit 2, we'll be looking at which sports matter most where and why, how you measure that, and what it means. But just know that it's a complex structure, and sport provides ample opportunity for politics to intrude. That'll give us lots to talk about in this class, which is a good thing since we've got 3/4 of the semester left. If you got any questions for me before you start the discussion for this unit, please email me or call me as soon as you can. I look forward to hearing from you. Cheers.